Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Dexter Resurrection Episode 1. It's called A Beaten Heart. Spoilers for the episode as always. This is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Cindy for picking the show. Now I am a little bit late with this, so I should have done this when it came out, like that week. However, I got sick. I've been sick. I was heavily sick for almost 2 full weeks. So if anything feels like it's been taking a while, that's why. But yes, so I'm squeezing in some Patreon sponsored videos just before the month ends now that I'm feeling better. And Dexter's up first. Poor Cindy saved a bunch of our Patreon sponsored slots so that I could just do pretty much all of these episodes week to week. And then I got sick, so I got a little bit of catching up to do. But watch the first one here, and just some background for anyone jumping into this review who's wondering what my history with Dexter is. It's complicated, frankly. I watched the original show for most of its run. I never watched the final season, but I watched the original show and thought it got very, very bad, right? The first season, pretty solid. Season 4 is not bad, certainly. Maybe the best main plot, but I think Season 4 was guilty of having a lot of really bad side plots. So, there's that, but I thought it got very repetitive and I had a lot of complaints and so on and so on. And as far as the follow-up shows go, because this is not the first time Dexter's came back, this is like the third time Dexter's came back in some form. But I actually had a Patreon sponsored review for the first episode of the last one, and I think I also saw the first episode of the original sequel series, which I think was called New Blood, I want to say. The last one was the prequel, which was Original Sin. So I've watched the first episodes of both of those. I never watched the rest of them because I didn't think they were good. I thought they were bad. So I'm coming into this not expecting to like it. Let me make that clear up front. For any Dexter fans who are here thinking I'm going to be doing some praising review or have adoration for the show, I don't. I think the show got terrible in its original run, and I don't really think anything I've watched from the newer stuff has inspired me with much confidence. Now, this first episode is kind of split in two. It's following up the last show. There was a nice healthy previously on segment, which I appreciated given that I didn't watch the damn thing, barring the first episode. Didn't feel like I missed much though. Ultimately, that series seems to have ended with Dexter being shot by Harrison, his son, it seems like. And he's been in a coma for a number of weeks or whatever, and this episode's him waking up and kind of like getting back into the world. Meanwhile, Harrison has moved to New York. It seems like we're doing Dexter Takes Manhattan this season, because by the end of this episode, Dexter is also in New York. And he is working at a hotel, maybe even living at the hotel as well, it seems like. And I'm not even sure if he's supposed to be. It seems like the other staff members are kind of helping him out. I think of the two sides of this story, the Harrison story is definitely the better one. And it's not amazing by any means, but I think it's alright in the sense that it introduces us to the character where he is now. It feels like it's building up to him going through some big changes where he's going to sort of start to become a serial killer himself, and he's clearly friends with some of the people he works with. He's good with the guests, and ultimately it builds to him being faced with this ethical situation that inspires him to kill on his own. I think for the first time. Again, I never watched all of that last show, so I'm not 100% sure, but it feels like the first time he's done this on his own. So I thought that was reasonably well done, right? It does a decent enough job of like going through the motions and kind of showing that he's this likable guy to the people around him. He looks out for others, he's good friends with them, and it even does that thing where it shows you him meet the potential victim. So there's the thing that ultimately leads to him killing someone is that this sort of douchebag rich guy who's at the hotel is trying to take advantage of a woman who can barely stand up drunk. And earlier in the episode, Harrison met this young woman and kind of just had a little chat with her in the elevator. And it wasn't even like it was the start of a romance or anything. It was just kind of like, pleasant small talk. But she's this kind of naive girl. It's her first time in the city, and she's all excited to be here for some conference or something. And he hears all this, so it humanizes her. He understands who she is. He knows that she's kind of excited, that she's young, she's eager, And then he sees her like blackout drunk, hanging off this guy's arm, and he like asks Harrison to help get her back to his room. And he's clearly wrestling with his conscience while he's doing this the whole time. The guy kind of pays him off at the end, says, "Hey, forget you ever saw anything." And he does take the money, kind of like reluctantly. He is walking away, but when he hears her cry out the word no, that's when he goes back and sort of bangs in the door, or even he uses his key card, I think, to get in. And he bursts in and confronts the guy, who basically says, "Hey, even if you take her away, there'll be another girl tomorrow." And it really hits home the idea that this guy is, this is a serial thing that he does. He assaults women, he does not look for consent, and it's effectively just giving Harrison a longer and longer list of reasons why I should just kill this guy. And he does. He beats his head in with the top of the toilet, the tank lid. And it's pretty brutal, it's pretty violent, and he sort of calms down. He gets her back to her room, and then because she's passed out for this, so she's technically in the room, but she is unconscious for all this. And then he goes about the methodical cleaning of the crime scene, wiping up the blood, taking the body down in one of the carts to the kitchen, which is empty because it's the middle of the night, cutting it up, all that stuff. And he cuts it up just like Dexter would, puts it in a bunch of different trash bags, just like Dexter would. What he does that Dexter wouldn't do, though, is that he just puts the trash bags with the rest of the hotel trash, and then the garbage men come and pick it up. And sure enough, when they're at the dump and they're throwing it to the side, one of the bag rips open, they see a leg or whatever, and that gets the police involved and sets us down the path that we're going on. And it's ultimately hearing on the news that someone's been cut up like this that makes Dexter realize he has to come to New York and try and give his son some help, because clearly he's cocked up here, he's made a mistake, and already the police by the end of the episode are sniffing around the hotel. The lead detective's kind of looking at him funny because he was staring a little bit, so he's not doing a really good job of keeping off the radar. So Dexter's expertise is going to be needed here for that. So yeah, I thought this was okay. Like, I wasn't blown away with it by any means, but like I say, it does all the things it needs to do. It gives you him being likable. It gives you a deplorable character that you're going to be okay with him killing. Really sets up this idea that, like, just saving this girl's not enough, that he's going to keep doing things, and it's just enough to sort of push him over that line. So it does all the bits. It humanizes her first as well, so that he definitely cares about her. He just knows enough to understand that she's a person and kind of have a bit of a connection there. And the methodical cleaning up of the crime scene, I think, is all right as well. I think that's a fun enough bit. Especially since, because we know he's bound to make mistakes because he's not Dexter, I think it adds a little layer of like, oh, he's going to mess up. How's he going to mess up? So you're sort of looking for what he does wrong as he's going through it. And it's also a little bit tense because he's in a pretty accessible area. He's doing this in the big kitchen where who knows what member of staff might walk in here in the middle of the night. Like, it's, at any point he could be caught. So there's a little bit of tension. I do think that the lead detective who gets involved, so it's this kind of like badass lady cop who has got a bit of a Sherlock skill. And by that I mean she's kind of noticing details, and the other, like, her partner's like, oh, watch this kid. Like, she's... and she's even kind of antisocial and doesn't have social skills, like kind of like a Sherlock character, where she kind of wants to berate the uniformed officer for something, and the other detective's like, hey, give him a break, kind of thing. So they're really going for a particular archetype with this character. And it's not that I think the actress does a bad job or anything like that. She's perfectly fine, but it's just a very cliched, like, super, like, detective who can sniff out every little clue kind of thing. So that's a little bit whatever, but I think the Harrison side of the plot is perfectly fine for what it is, and maybe is an okay sign going forward, given that Dexter's coming into this plot as opposed to it being, like, I don't like Dexter's side of this story, at all. I think it's terrible. But he's coming into Harrison's plot, so I guess the hope is there that it's going to be more about him helping Harrison with his shit and being a mentor to him, and that might mean that we're in for an okay time. Now, what the hell Uma Thurman's character is and what she's doing, sneaking into a house looking for serial killer, trophies, I have no idea. Because this was so separate from everything else in the episode. I guess it's just going to be a case of she's going to be hunting down Harrison or Dexter as the season goes on when they start to sniff them out. But she leaves like a... I think if it's been a lot. I watched this a while ago because I thought I was going to record it earlier, but I was still too sick. But I think she leaves like something into, because Dexter used to have the slides of the blood as his trophies. She basically finds this killer's trophy thing, and she leaves something in there so that the killer will know that someone's been tampering. So what exactly her goal is, I'm unclear on right now, but it was so separate from everything else. Obviously, it's going to tie into everything later, but it cut to her doing her like Catwoman-esque, like sneaking into a apartment building bit, and it was kind of a weird pivot. But anyway, I want to talk about the Dexter stuff, because the Dexter stuff is the terrible stuff in this episode. So the first like chunk of it, he's in a coma still, and it's basically an excuse to have a series of nostalgia cameos. Where, because at first there's like a scene where he's at like a cemetery. Again, it's in his head. He's in a coma, but there's like those gravestones for people from the past. His wife, Dox is there. All his sister, all those characters, and it's like, okay, so right, this is fine. We see their names, no big deal. But then we actually start to see some of these characters, not all of them by any means, but the moment where Dox shows up and actually says surprise mother effer when he shows up, which was kind of the memed line from the original show, because everyone sort of shared that clip over and over again. I face palmed, because this is just fan service. This is just pandering. Obviously, Dexter's always seen his dead dad. That was part of the show right from the beginning. So when he sees his dad again later, I mean, that's fine. Like, I didn't really have any issue with that. But they start talking about the ice truck killer, which was the season 1 plot. We see Jimmy Smits from season 3. We see John Lithgow show up in his head to berate him. He was obviously maybe the arguably most popular killer from the show, or villain from the show, and from season 4. And Dox then shows up. Like, it's just a string of nostalgia, of cheap pops, of like, hey, remember this character? And I do wonder, like, who fondly remembers the Jimmy Smits plot from season 3? Because that's when I was really starting to have problems with the show, because it kind of felt like every season had the exact same formula, where someone gets close to Dexter, finds out who he is, but then turns out to be a villain who wants to exploit it, and then Dexter ultimately has to kill them. A lot of the seasons fell into that, and season 2 definitely did that, so I remember season 3 feeling very similar, and I did not think fondly of that season really at all. That was where I was starting to really struggle with the show. So having Jimmy Smits show up here as his character from season 3 just kind of made me groan. I was just like, why are you reminding me of this? Stop it. But it really further fueled this idea of this like desperate attempt of nostalgia, of clinging to things from the past show. And obviously this is a nostalgia sequel show, right? It's actually kind of amazing how long Showtime has been kind of going back to the Dexter well and milking it and try to keep it coming. But so I hated all that stuff. It is what it is. I really don't have too much to say about it. But Dexter obviously wakes up and he has his physical therapy and all that. The big turning point is that Batista shows up. They got him back, and he acts all nice. He brings him some food, but there's kind of these undertones. And clearly, he is here to investigate him, because there was enough stuff left in his wake. I mean, Batista himself brings up, why did you change your name and let everyone think you were still dead when you didn't die, blah, 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 blah. He clearly, obviously, was very close to, like, Huerta, and Dexter, I think, ultimately killed her when she found out who he was. Or actually, I think, did Deb shoot her? I think that was the last episode of this show of the original show that I ever saw, was that episode. So I think that's what happened. So Batista's got like personal motivations to want to like investigate and prove. It's actually so funny how much he brings up people kept accusing Dexter of being the Bay Harbor butcher, and Dexter just sort of like, whoa, that's crazy. To a certain point where I'm like, I don't even know how you can keep a straight face while you're still lying about this. Like, so many people have accused you of being this killer. And I know Batista clearly thinks it is him. Batista clearly thinks he's a bad guy at this point, but he's playing along and so on and so on. Anyway, this leads to a whole bunch of stuff where when Dexter finds out that he needs to go to New York, he hears it on the radio or whatever that Harrison... I mean, it doesn't say Harrison, obviously, but he hears the method of the body being cut up and he puts 2 and 2 together. he has to do a whole sort of like escape plan where Batista's waiting in the waiting room and Dexter has to try and get out without him noticing. It involves a phone call and whatever else, but he steals there's a guy across the hall who died in the rest home, and Dexter's able to steal his car to get away. So the episode just kind of builds up to him arriving in New York, and they get one shot in Times Square, so you feel the budget, you feel like they got a little bit of the prime location. But it ends with Dexter just staring at Harrison at the hotel and just kind of being like, hey, this is the idea for the season, this is the idea for where we're going. Yeah, I think the big thing for me, other than the nostalgia stuff, which was making me groan, because it just feels like an endless series of references to make fans of the original show get excited, but they're very hollow, they're very cheap. I just, like, there's this kind of like thinly veiled excuse of like, oh, Dexter's always thinking about his past, and he's always thinking about talking to people who were important to him. Although maybe like Ghost Deb will show up at some point, right, in his head. But it did kind of stand out that she wasn't in this list of people. Like, if you're going to do this list of people, it's almost like more notable who isn't there. Usually just because the actors either didn't want to come back or because they didn't want to try and get everyone because they could only afford 3 or 4 guest stars or whatever the reason is. But it almost sticks out a bit more that certain people aren't showing up, right? Like Julie Benz as his wife, like she doesn't show up. Again, maybe she will later in the season. I don't know. But like, it feels kind of weird, some of the examples that do not show up, given who do show up. That was a weird sentence, but you know what I mean. And then the other thing for me that I was getting at with the Batista like acting nice with Dexter scene is that some things in this show just feel like overdone at this point. Some things just feel old hat. And one of those big things is Dexter covering for what he does and covering for who he is. And having to sit through him just kind of awkwardly smirk and say things like, oh, well, that's crazy. Why would anyone think that about me? Like, I'm so over it. Like, I'm so done, because so much of the original show was that of him just kind of awkwardly smirking and playing along because he couldn't reveal certain details. And the more people suspected of him being a killer and like investigating it as the show went on, the more and more tedious it got. And it just feels like bringing in old characters, although it's obvious why they're doing it. They want to have more nostalgia. They want to have more callbacks. They want to have more of that stuff because it gets people excited. In a weird way, having other characters from the old show back up, like this, particularly Batista, who's really there. He's not just in his head. Like, he's there to actually investigate him. It's almost like a hindrance in some ways, because it's... Or not a hindrance, but like it hurts the suspension of disbelief, because the idea that Batista has found him, knows he's here, and isn't able to just immediately arrest him and just take him in because all of this is so suspicious that it's hard to kind of comprehend. One of the details he brings up is that he got Dexter officially declared alive. Because, one of the things that he can't do if Dexter's officially dead is arrest him. But I don't know, it's almost like a noose around the storytelling to have stuff from that original show still be a factor. Normally, I celebrate continuity, but this show's continuity is so repetitive that the best thing it could possibly do is get far away from it. It really is. And it's not that Michael C. Hall's given a bad performance or anything like that. It's not like he's not doing well with the role. When I say I'm frustrated at him, pretending to not know stuff, it's just because I'm sick of that plot beat. I'm sick of, the performance is fine, but I've just seen it so much. I've seen it so many times, and it's not exciting to see it again. It's not, like, the idea that someone's getting close to proving that Dexter's a killer was a recurring thing in the original show. We had multiple characters who suspected him and got close to getting him. You had Dokes. You had, I can't remember his name, but the tall white guy who, it was like season 5 or 6, he was getting close to him. There was that. Eventually, like, where? Like, it was something that was done over and over again. Like, one by one, people suspected that he was up to something, that he was a killer, and would investigate him. and then ultimately he would get away with it because the show didn't want to end. So we can't have Dexter be caught. That was the big thing at the time. So yeah, I'm not excited by someone else that he knows investigating him for the 5th time. Okay? I'm just not excited by that in any way, shape, or form. So that's where I see a lot of pitfalls coming in this show. And because Cindy's making me watch the whole season, I'm going to see it all. I'm going to find out how all this plays out. And I could not be less excited for that. So that said, though, thank you for the support. Thanks to anyone who supports us on Patreon. It is greatly appreciated. But sometimes they want to see me miserable, and this is an example of me possibly being miserable. So, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, like I said, I'm a few episodes behind, especially since they put out 2 that first week. So I'll get to episode 2 hopefully later this week and start getting the momentum to get up to date going on it. But yeah, that is my thoughts on the first episode of Dexter Resurrection. It's not the worst thing ever, but I'm hardly filled with hope, and it's full of nostalgia bait. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that usual stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And, of course, you can support over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. That is also a valid way to support and help keep everything coming. And of course, even a one-time super thanks is greatly appreciated. Also, go check out MailFuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. They started coming back last week after my sickness. So, thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?